And welcome to the show, Te Rawhitiroa Bosch. How are you, mate?
Get a pet. Awesome. Nice to be here.
Good morning to you. Lovely to see you this morning, and thank you for giving us a few minutes.
Sweet.
We've been talking this morning about NFTs and what they are. Professor Paul Moon put out a post on LinkedIn and his Facebook, social medias, yada yada, about there being a lack of protection for Indigenous IP. Now, I saw you a few weeks ago in a story on One News talking exactly about that. You are, let's bring this up so everyone can see, you are an artist, you are a photographer, you have a thriving business. I've spent a lot of time on your website. Your photos are
wicked.
Amazing.
Cheers, bro.
But you've also started to dabble in the world of NFTs.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you would just tell us your experiences of going, this site is called OpenSea, going on to OpenSea, and what you discovered from let's be honest, a cultural appropriation point of view when you jumped on there looking to get into it yourself.
Yeah, well, basically that sort of appropriation or stealing of IP and stuff like that, that's been happening for ages, and NFTs is just the kind of the next frontier, the next new space where it's happening. And myself as a Maori artist coming into the space, but also as one who's connected to a whole lot of other artists, and encouraging Maori artists to get in there, is knowing that we can't actually control what other people do. Someone else is gonna do rip-offs. It's just like, did you get the real Nikes or did you get the rip-off Ickies? Or did you get a real Nixon watch or did you get a Nonix from Malaysia? Those sorts of things. So that's always going to happen. But I think what's really important is educating people about how to look into a project, how to look into someone who's selling NFTs, to really go, oh, well, is that their IP? Are they ripping it off? Are they doing it well? Because when I traveled overseas, there were people who had, look at you're from New Zealand, look at my Maori tattoo, and it was nothing, like, it was ugly for one, and it had nothing to do with moko. But people are thinking, oh yeah, I can grab that design and I can use it. It's kind of like the war bonnet story over in the States. Like fashion brands grabbing a headdress, a Native American headdress, thinking it's okay to use it in their ad campaign or whatever, but it's a complete
Victoria's
misappropriation.
Secret.
And it really denigrates the culture and the purpose of whatever that thing is. So it's the same with moko, applying moko to to a whole lot of different things that's not really the context, or and is it really moko? Because does it have a story, or is it just someone's ripped off and drawn a few spirals? So in the NFT space, because it's it's the wide world, and like you alluded to, we've already seen, if you search Maori on OpenSea, which is like the trade me of NFTs, there's a whole lot of there's a whole lot of different NFTs. You can see here, like, that doesn't even look Maori, and we didn't have those weapons and anything like that. There's a whole lot of stuff, but what worried me is there was also things like that those picture of tupuna Maori, so ancestors. Basically, if I went and grabbed your great grandfather's portrait and then I started selling it on as an NFT, you'd feel pretty ratchet about that, eh? Like, you wouldn't be stoked. And so the other thing, I'll just talking about these ones here,
sure,
is that whole caricature and denigrating caricature thing that's always happened, but quite often about native peoples. And if you look at that's a whole nother thing. You can go into the history of different cartoons and stuff, and how say native people or how Maori people were depicted in these cartoons in ways that have a look at that one on the far right,
that one,
the male Maori warrior. It's, one, doesn't look anything like a male Maori warrior, and two, just looks like the boogeyman or whatever. So it's really concerning seeing those things, but you can't actually control it. So the kind of angle myself and my mates in the space are taking is, how do you educate people to know what's a real Nike versus a Icky shoe? What's a real Nixon versus a non-Nix? How can you look into a project, look at you know, when you see a project, when you see some cool art, sure, it might be really cool art, but who made it? And those are some of the things that you can see in NFTs, is it has that whakapapa, it has that link back to who created it, has that provenance, and that's going to be an important thing, you know, going forward. I've got some personal mates, Anikaro Harawira, another fellow Wirumu Barrable, their designs, so their artwork, straight stolen off their social media, and then this international company put it onto a whole bunch of duvets, pillows,
Wow.
hoodies, and then sold it through a pretend address in Australia. We know it's pretend because some mates went around to go and say, "Hey, what are you up to?" And it was just a fake address.
Some mates
So
went around.
yeah. So you know, like the that stuff's happening. So theft, intellectual property theft, and just because you can't prosecute it in a court of law doesn't mean it's not wrong, eh?
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's the biggest thing. So if you, as a art collector, as an investor, if you're looking to, you know, purchase Maori art, definitely have a look into who the people are,
Mm-hmm.
like who the creators are. There's other projects that I've heard of that say a Pākehā company would get a Maori artist to do the original art, and then, you know, they might pay them a small fee or something, and then start selling these NFTs for like heaps. And then, so that's my second question: who benefits? You know,
Right.
so who's
Follow the
created
money.
it? Who benefits? Yeah,
Yeah.
follow the money, and that's
Yeah.
like anything, eh?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
can see when people are getting exploited, and you can see when things are legit. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, look a little bit further than the image that you see on the screen. Look into who's making it, who's benefiting, why they're doing it, all those sorts of things, because that all matters.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm looking at a project, that all matters to me anyway. I don't want to be buying from something that's, you know, exploiting people or denigrating, you know, someone else's mana.
It is interesting when you talk about exploiting people, because I think straight away that there is a huge push towards, like, let's avoid blood diamonds. So where there's this idea out there that let's not exploit these people in this country doing this terrible job. And this is it may not be exactly the same as a 6-year-old kid down in mine, but it's on the same side of that conversation about
Exactly.
exploitation. And I think you make a perfect talking about the headpiece in America. I think we need to go a step further. I used to work as a talkback host on ZB, and when people would talk about treaty issues and stuff, I'd always try and bring it back to make it personal to them. So if your forebears in Ireland, like mine were, had 10,000 acres of land, and the government in 1913 acquired that or borrowed that land for the war efforts, and then never gave it back, and if they had have given it back right now, you'd be worth $10 million. Would you have a problem with it? And to be honest, the people who were disingenuous would say no, and I just say you're lying. Of course you would.
Because
So if you make it into a way that they can understand, and I think your ancestors, is it like saying your ancestors, like my grandfather, my great grandfather, my whatever, if that was being sold as a commodity, that perfectly identifies the issue with that side of it. What's a little bit cloudier, perhaps legally, is things like tamoko and designs that belong to an iwi, because, and I think I said this to you in the text, you change a song by 3 notes and you're not breaching legal copyright. So if there is a design that belongs to a region or a group or a family or a whānau or an iwi or whatever, and that's just changed, the lines are a bit thicker or there's a slightly different angle on it, and so technically it's not in breach of copyright, how does that work? And the last question before I let you talk again, is the line between appreciation, emulation, and appropriation. Like, I'm sure within Maori culture, of which I'm not a part, there must be an amount of pride when you see appreciation out there, but there must be also an amount of shock when you see appropriation out there. And where's that line?
Yeah, I think there's a guy, Louis Gong, over in the States. He's a native artist, and they've got a company called Eighth Generation. And one of the lines that they were putting out, and he was, quite strong about, was buy from inspired natives, not native inspired. So again, that goes back to
brilliant.
It's beautiful. Buy from inspired Maori, not Maori inspired, art. And that goes back to those 2 questions that I was talking about. So, first off, who's making it? Is it an inspired native, or is it native inspired? Who benefits from it? Is it, some company offshore, or is it the actual people whose art form that belongs to, whose IP that is? And tamoko, because each tamoko is unique, it's not like, okay, if you did a mangopare, then then that will breach copyright laws. And I'm no lawyer anyway, so I
Yeah.
can't talk about that side. But I can tell you that, if someone else is ripping off our designs, for their commercial gain, and has no connection to the people whose designs that came from, it doesn't sit right to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel right. And like you said, personalizing it, that those photos, I saw a blimmin' one of the paintings, portraits of Tamati Wakanene on there. And I'm like, first of all, is that your ancestor that you're selling? No. If it's someone else's, then what are you up to? And two, you don't even have the IP for that art. Those are well established artists up there. So if
Yeah.
someone else started grabbing those photos, and started selling them, that's just theft.
Totally.
But the hard thing is with like the internet and the blockchain, it's hard to prove. One, it's hard to find. Two, and it would be hard to prosecute, because what if someone in some other country had just copied photos off my website and start selling them? So I
Yeah.
think it's less about trying to control what other people do, and it's more trying to influence people to, if you are interested, because we have beautiful, our mahi toi are beautiful. They carry depth, they carry stories. That's the other thing. If you're buying from an inspired Maori, you're going to get the story, you're going to get the depth. If you're buying from Maori inspired art, then it's just a bunch of squiggles on a page. It doesn't have the story, it doesn't have the whakapapa, it doesn't have the deeper connection to the land or to the culture that it came from.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing, just educating people, to be able to see deeper, so you get the real thing, because you don't want to be caught walking down the street with a pair of ickies, do you? It's not that cool. It's
No,
not
it's
that
not that
cool.
cool. Hey, dude, your photography is amazing. If people want to check it out,
Thank you, bro.
rawhitiroa.com, isn't it? .com? Yep, .com.
Yep.
Te Rawhitiroa. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you giving us a perspective on this. Let's say from the inside, looking out, as opposed to what all of us tend to do. So we appreciate that, bro.
Cheers, bro. Appreciate the question, and appreciate you reaching out, bro. That's awesome.